Some relationships that were once perceived as sources of comfort and safety may no longer fulfill that role. However, with the passage of time, a transformation occurs. It is unclear when or how this occurred, but currently, each interaction results in feelings of exhaustion, tension, and even suffocation. The most distressing aspect? At times, it is not an unfamiliar individual who elicits such feelings. It is a significant individual. Individuals who induce feelings of guilt, inadequacy, or restrict personal authenticity are frequently those whom one believed to be reliable sources of support. Have you ever questioned why you remain silent, suppressing your feelings, and striving to sustain a relationship that causes you pain, solely due to familial ties or the duration of your acquaintance? As individuals age, they often internalize the belief that enduring pain is intrinsic to love. That evading confrontation signifies respect, and that disengagement equates to ingratitude. However, the reality is as follows. Individuals should not compromise their emotional well-being to maintain a relationship that consistently inflicts pain. This video presents 9 distinct indicators that suggest the necessity of establishing boundaries or potentially disengaging. Regardless of whether the individual is a family member or a long-term friend. This does not constitute selfishness. This is the manner in which one practices self-love. The right time comes. 1. They consistently induce feelings of guilt. Despite the absence of any wrongdoing on your part. Have you ever experienced a solitary afternoon, feeling a weight in your heart not from anger, but from sadness, immediately following a phone call with your children? It is disheartening, not because of any inappropriate remarks, but because of an elevated vocal tone or the denial of a request. You remained silent. You stated that you would endeavor to perform to the best of your ability. As is customary, you assumed the responsibility once more. Upon concluding the call, what remained was not a sense of connection. The experience involved a sense of guilt, characterized by the perception of insufficient effort, inadequate sacrifice, and a belief of not being worthy of familial love. The familiarity of guilt can lead to its unnoticed presence. You are used to hearing things like, "You don't love the grandkids like their other grandma," "You didn't help, so don't act like you did," and "You don't get me." Words that appear insubstantial can inflict significant harm when reiterated excessively. Ultimately, distinguishing between love and concealed blame becomes challenging. I once sat with a 68-year-old woman whose eyes were red after her child expressed, "You don't help us with anything." She stated that her reluctance to assist is not due to a lack of desire to help. I no longer possess the necessary strength. However, people label me as selfish when I express this viewpoint. Ultimately, I find myself apologizing, despite not having committed any wrongdoing. Her narrative is not uncommon. Many older adults experience a persistent sense of inadequacy, despite a lifetime of sacrifice, prioritizing others, and suppressing their aspirations to support others. Psychologists have a specific term for this phenomenon. This phenomenon is known as emotional manipulation through guilt induction. It occurs when an individual induces feelings of guilt or inadequacy in another to exert dominance. Such dynamics within a family pose a risk, as guilt can masquerade as love. This complicates the process of questioning and expressing dissent. Repeated assertions of error can lead to internalization of that belief. It is essential to be aware of this information. Genuine love should not be accompanied by feelings of guilt. Sacrifice should not be a perpetual burden. An apology should not be offered merely to maintain harmony. Consistently apologizing, explaining, and initiating contact, particularly when not at fault, warrants reflection on the nature of the relationship. It may be necessary to consider whether this constitutes love. Alternatively, could it be considered a weight? Establishing boundaries does not equate to severing relationships. Sometimes, this is the only way to preserve one's peace of mind. It is unjust for any individual to endure lifelong guilt, especially if they have contributed significantly to others. Having contributed significantly to others, it may now be appropriate to consider investing in your well-being. 2. They manifest when required and subsequently vanish when no longer necessary. Many older adults experience a subtle form of sadness within themselves, the sensation of being overlooked. During holidays, birthdays, anniversaries, or in cold weather, One often anticipates a message or phone call. A simple inquiry, such as, "How are you doing, Mom?" can be sufficient to evoke warmth and connection. However, the phone remains silent. The house remains stationary. You repeatedly rationalize that they are likely occupied. When a call occurs, it frequently involves requests for financial assistance, childcare support, or the delegation of a problem requiring resolution. During those instances, the voice on the opposite end appears notably warm and familiar. Subsequently, it disappears just as swiftly. It may feel as though one is merely a transient element in the lives of others. Interestingly, despite observing the occurrence, one still consents. You provide assistance. One may rationalize the situation by asserting familial bonds, leading to an inability to refuse. However, the pain persists. When one is unwell, it often goes unnoticed by others. During a hospital stay, it is the nurse who provides care and support, rather than one's children. When experiencing leg pain and the need for medical attention arises, it often appears that no one is available to assist. Each of these moments functions as a subtle yet painful intrusion, gradually affecting one's emotional state. One day, one may come to the realization that their existence in others' lives is contingent upon the needs of those individuals. An elderly woman recounted that during her relocation to a new apartment, she contacted her children and grandchildren for assistance with packing. Due to their preoccupations, she discreetly employed an individual to assist with lifting the boxes while personally wrapping each dish and pot. The subsequent week, one of her grandchildren contacted her, expressing cheerfulness, and inquired, "Grandma, do you have a little extra money? I am lacking sufficient funds for tuition." She provided assistance. After completing the transfer of funds, she ceased communication for several months. She claimed not to assign blame, yet her expression conveyed an alternative narrative. Distant and suggestive of an unvoiced inquiry she refrained from articulating. "Could we discuss whether our relationship is balanced and mutually beneficial?" A one-sided relationship is characterized by continuous giving without reciprocal return. When love is not reciprocated, it ceases to be familial and transforms into a transactional relationship. Individuals arrive, acquire what they require, and depart, leaving one with an increasing sense of emptiness. The issue arises not from the loss itself but from the diminished sense of significance. The process of aging should not entail concealed solitude. One deserves love not only during acts of giving, but also during times of vulnerability and support needs. If someone only comes to you when they need help, it may be wise to rethink the relationship. This decision should not be motivated by anger, but rather to protect your heart from the ongoing disappointment. Relationships possess value primarily when they provide nourishment rather than leaving individuals feeling invisible, isolated, and alone within their family context. 3. The disregard for your feelings is evident. There are instances when one may wish to express a minor sorrow, an issue that has been burdensome, or perhaps there is a need for an attentive listener. However, upon initiating conversation, the interlocutor dismisses it with a well-known phrase. Age may contribute to a tendency for overthinking, however. The situation may not warrant such a strong emotional response. Their subtle smile suggests that your remarks lack significance, causing you to fall silent. The absence of sadness does not imply its complete departure but rather a diminished inclination to articulate one's emotions. Older adults, despite a lifetime of experiences, maintain a youthful perspective in their emotional state. A thoughtless remark from a child or grandchild, a dispassionate glance at the dinner table, or the mere lack of a check-in during times of illness can all cause significant emotional distress. The most painful part is not the moment itself, but the feeling that one's emotions are trivial or overly sensitive due to age. One may gradually start to doubt the legitimacy of their feelings of sadness, the appropriateness of crying, or the validity of their emotional pain. Self-doubt begins to emerge. An elderly woman once recounted her story. Whenever she attempted to offer a gentle observation regarding her daughter's use of shouting as a disciplinary method for the grandchildren, her daughter would respond, "Mom, don't interfere. You have aged and thus may lack understanding." This seemingly insignificant comment was enough to silence her for a week. Not out of anger but out of sorrow. She experienced a sense of invisibility within her household. cohabitating with family members, yet her contributions appeared to hold little significance, leading her to cease providing counsel. Upon hearing her grandchild's cries, she averted her gaze, feeling a profound sense of sorrow yet accepting the situation. Speaking may lead to accusations of being dramatic or overthinking once more. These ostensibly innocuous words represent a nuanced and detrimental form of emotional dismissal. This phenomenon, known as emotional invalidation in psychology, involves making an individual perceive their feelings as incorrect or insignificant. Frequent occurrences lead individuals to withdraw internally, hesitant to express themselves, and ultimately, they may develop a distrust of their institutions. Loneliness manifests during meals, in unvoiced conversations, and in unnoticed sighs. It is important to recognize that emotions cannot be classified as right or wrong. Experiencing sadness is a legitimate emotional response. Any experience of pain warrants recognition rather than dismissal. Age does not diminish one's entitlement to experience emotions. This suggests that you warrant greater understanding. As you have endured significant emotional burdens, your perspective is not unreasonable, rather, it highlights aspects of life that others may have overlooked. If someone makes you feel guilty for being sad or belittles your pain, they may not deserve your company. Establishing boundaries with individuals who disregard your emotions is not an act of selfishness. It is a matter of affirming one's entitlement to be acknowledged. 4. They engage in comparisons that induce feelings of inferiority. Some relationships result in interactions that evoke not warmth, but rather a subtle sense of injury. The injury is not due to disputes or severe language but rather to seemingly innocuous comparisons. So-and-so's mother continues to travel frequently, while my friend's grandmother prepares meals daily and cultivates organic vegetables for her grandchildren. Additionally, another grandmother manages the care of her grandchildren alongside numerous other responsibilities. Initially, these remarks may appear trivial, however. They gradually accumulate, undermining one's self-worth and fostering a sense of inadequacy regarding one's contributions and presence. While a singular occurrence may be dismissed, the recurrence of such events fosters a belief in their validity. One begins to exert greater effort, increasing sacrifices and compliance, not out of joy, but due to the apprehension of ongoing comparison and criticism. The perception of being inferior to others, particularly within one's own family, manifests as a subtle yet enduring source of distress. I encountered a gentleman in his 70s who resided alone following the death of his wife. During each visit, his daughter prioritized inquiries about the cleanliness of the house over his well-being. "You are quite different from my father-in-law, who is very organized." Initially, he dismissed it with laughter, however. As time progressed, he became increasingly subdued, smiled less frequently, and withdrew socially. He stated that he cannot be angry with his daughter, however. Her repeated remarks lead him to feel like a burden. His gaze wandered distantly, suggesting that each word had gradually diminished his self-esteem. While comparison may appear to serve as motivation, it frequently functions as a nuanced means of undermining an individual's worth, particularly when the audience is elderly. An individual who has dedicated a lifetime to hard work, generosity, and sacrifice seeks genuine recognition. Acknowledgement of accomplishments, no matter how minor, is more beneficial than reminders of deficiencies. Using individuals as benchmarks to elevate others' sense of superiority is unjust. If interactions consistently lead to feelings of inadequacy and diminished self-worth, such behavior does not constitute closeness, rather, it signifies emotional erosion. It is entirely justified to withdraw from relationships that diminish your self-worth. Growing older is not a matter of demonstrating one's ability to compare favorably with others, rather, it involves embracing a complete existence, characterized by authenticity, kindness, and inherent worthiness of respect. 5. Communication with them induces feelings of stress and anxiety. Some individuals are so well known to you that you can accurately anticipate their responses when you communicate information. You are familiar with their tone, timing, and even their silences, however. Rather than experiencing a sense of safety, you feel apprehensive prior to initiating a phone call. Physiological responses such as increased heart rate and chest tightness may occur. resembling the anticipation associated with an emotional assessment. You engage in mental preparation regarding your responses, identifying what to articulate and what to refrain from expressing, while also conditioning yourself to remain unaffected by potential distant, irritated, or dismissive reactions from others. The conversation was brief, yet it left one with the impression of having assumed a persona, an agreeable individual who demands little and acquiesces to all, merely to prevent the dialogue from becoming uncomfortable. The type of tension described arises not from unfamiliar individuals but from those in close relationships, such as a child, sibling, or long-term friend, individuals who were once trusted and served as sources of comfort. However, at some point, their presence began to induce feelings of inadequacy. Interactions may lack overt hostility or harsh words, yet they often resemble a performance. Each word is selected with precision, tone is calibrated, and personal topics are avoided, as even a minor misstep could escalate the conversation into a debate or, more detrimentally, cause emotional harm. A woman in her late 60s recounted that she needed to take a deep breath before each call to her son. She stated that he is consistently occupied, frequently irritable, and often interrupts her. I do not complete my sentence before he interrupts, saying, "Mom, you are rambling, is there something important?" At times, I feel compelled to share details about my small garden or a new recipe I have experimented with. Yet I refrain from doing so. He listens with apparent disinterest, suggesting that I am insignificant. She smiled slightly, but her eyes glowed red. The calls meant to connect turned into moments where she felt like a burden, thinking her contributions were too much and her need for acknowledgement was unreasonable. Over time, one may begin to withdraw from conversations, not due to anger, but out of fear regarding subsequent emotional responses, such as disappointment, anxiety, or feelings of being overly emotional or needy. Choosing silence in pursuit of peace may not constitute genuine tranquility, rather, it reflects a withdrawal motivated by fear. The individual who induces feelings of anxiety or discomfort during conversations should not occupy the position of intimacy in your life. A genuine connection should provide an environment conducive to exhalation, the expression of one's truth, and the absence of judgmental apprehension. If a relationship begins to resemble a precarious balancing act, it may be prudent to consider whether it is necessary to exert such effort to sustain something that is intended to provide comfort. If your response is negative, you are justified in withdrawing to safeguard your emotional well-being from discussions that now resemble performances rather than genuine connections. 6. One is compelled to make sacrifices as a matter of obligation. Eventually, there arises a moment in life when one anticipates a deceleration of pace. The children have grown up. The professional responsibilities have ended. And now is the time for personal fulfillment. However, for numerous older adults, particularly those with significant emotional capacity, that moment often does not materialize. Rather than resting, individuals often become ensnared in a perpetual cycle of obligation to give, driven not by desire but by societal expectations. Evelyn, aged 72, resides in a tranquil suburb located outside of Houston. She dedicated her entire adult life to raising 3 children while concurrently working full-time as a nurse. She consistently refrained from expressing dissatisfaction, stating that her children were her source of joy. Decades later, while many of her peers engage in book clubs or gardening during the mornings, Evelyn continues to rise at 6 a.m. to prepare her grandson for school. Her son and daughter-in-law both engage in extended work hours and requested her assistance for a limited duration of a few months. That occurred 2 years prior. Initially, Evelyn was indifferent. She adored her grandson and was happy to help. But slowly, the weight grew heavier. She started skipping her doctor appointments. She stopped going to church. Her knees began hurting more, and her days blurred into one long to-do list. When she gently mentioned taking a break or going home for a while, her son looked confused and said, "But Mom, we really count on you, we don't know what we'd do without you." That one sentence made Evelyn feel guilty for even thinking about her needs. And so she stayed. Her younger sister also calls from time to time, not to check in, but to ask for help with bills or to vent about her grown children. Evelyn listens patiently, offers what she can, and hangs up feeling drained. It's not that she doesn't love her family, she does. But somewhere along the way, her love became a resource that everyone expected but no one really saw. The truth is, sacrifice is beautiful when it's freely given. But when it becomes a duty, when it's assumed rather than appreciated, it slowly chips away at your spirit. People stop asking if you're okay. They stop seeing you as someone with needs and dreams of your own. And that's when giving becomes too heavy. You were not born to run on empty for people who don't know when to stop asking. Your time, your energy, your peace, they're unlimited. You are entitled to say no without guilt. You are entitled to rest, to recharge, and to live these later years on your terms. You've spent a lifetime showing up for others. Now it's your turn to show up for yourself. Such behavior is not a sign of selfishness but rather a realization that you are important too. They underestimate your contributions. When you send money to a family member, you expect a thank you. But all you receive is nothing. There's not a single word. Not even a thumbs up emoji was present. But heaven forbid you say no one time. Suddenly, you're the selfish one. Mom, you've got more than enough. Can't believe you're holding back now. They say. Somehow, giving becomes expected. And if you don't, you're the problem. As we get older, what hurts most isn't the money or the energy we give. It's the feeling of being taken for granted. You begin to question whether others view your kindness as a duty rather than a gift. Like your worth is measured by how much you give, not who you are. You're not Oni anymore. You are simply a source of comfort. Having a backup plan is crucial. The wallet serves as a vital component. Take Mr. Ray, 74, a retired postman in Ohio. For years, he's been sending small checks to his adult kids whenever they're in a bind. Car trouble, rent, school fees. He's happy to help. But last winter, he slipped on ice and ended up in the hospital. Ray's savings had taken a hit. And when his son texted him asking for money that month, he explained, "I'm a bit tight right now, I had some unexpected medical bills." The reply? The reply was a single word. Wow. No follow-up. No. Are you okay? Just now. That one word hit harder than the fall. Ray said quietly. It made me feel like the only thing that mattered was whether I could still send money. Psychologists call this kind of dynamic emotional imbalance. When one person gives and gives and gives while the other only notices when they stop. Over time, it chips away at your self-worth. You stop sharing. You stop speaking up. You start to believe that your value depends on how useful you are. And in older age, that kind of loneliness cuts deep because it doesn't come from being alone. It comes from being invisible to the people you love most. But here's what you need to remember. Your feelings are valid. You are not too sensitive. You are not selfish for feeling hurt. Being kind doesn't mean letting yourself be drained. We should respond to generosity with gratitude. Not with silence when it arrives or guilt when it doesn't. If you've been giving from your heart without ever feeling appreciated, it's acceptable to pause, not out of anger, not to impart a lesson to others, but to safeguard your peace. Step back gently, save some kindness for yourself. Because love, when it's real, is never one-sided. It doesn't demand. It doesn't disappear when you set a boundary. You've spent your life showing up for others. Now it's time to show up for you. And no, you don't need to feel guilty for that. Not even a little. 8. When you are with them, you are no longer yourself. There are some gatherings that leave you feeling like you just stepped off a movie set. There's no camera, no director, yet you still find yourself slipping into character. Playing the role of the cheerful one, the easygoing one, the one who doesn't mind. And all of this happens with family. You smile when you don't want to, nod when you really want to shake your head, and stay quiet when you deserve to speak. Only when you finally return home, let out a sigh, and sit down do you realize you've just spent the afternoon pretending to be someone you're not. Many older adults have mastered the art of enduring, but behind that so-called strength often lies a quiet sadness, a fear of being labeled difficult, too sensitive, or just overthinking because you're old. So they hold it in. They shrink themselves. They try to be pleasant, undemanding, and agreeable, but the cost is high. Every visit and conversation becomes exhausting, not due to age or physical exertion but due to the gradual erosion of their inner world. Mrs. Tuyat, who is 70 years old, once shared with me that her visits from her children and grandchildren often feel like an emotional marathon. They forbid her from expressing sadness or discussing any potentially negative topics. The son cautions his mother against referencing past events. Grandmother, please refrain from discussing your health excessively, it tends to be disheartening. Her grandchild humorously remarks. She organizes all items systematically. She exhibits a smile despite the meal's lack of flavor. She offers praise for the new outfit. Despite her lack of personal preference for it, she assents. Despite her internal dissent, following their departure, she experiences widespread bodily discomfort, not due to fragility but as a result of fatigue from suppressing her true self. Psychology refers to this phenomenon as emotional masking, where individuals adopt a facade to achieve social acceptance. Individuals engage in this behavior due to fears of rejection, concern about upsetting others, and apprehension regarding judgment. Prolonged use of a mask can lead to discomfort due to a sensation of suffocation. One begins to lose clarity regarding personal preferences, genuine thoughts, and essential needs. One risks accepting this behavior as a necessary condition for love. However, the reality is as follows. Kindness is not quantified by the extent of one's suppression. It concerns the extent to which one is permitted to express authenticity. Those who love you will accept you in both happy and bad times. They will be present during times when you require attention, not solely during instances of passive listening. If you frequently feel the need to brace yourself or pretend in the presence of someone, it may be advisable to consider a gradual withdrawal from that relationship. The goal is not to sever connections but to find autonomy according to one's own conditions. It is important to speak honestly without fear of hurting another person. It is important to embrace one's true self, even in the context of aging, which may involve experiencing loneliness, seeking companionship, or desiring a peaceful meal without the need to feign happiness. Living authentically does not necessitate daily performance. Individuals, regardless of age, are entitled to exist authentically. 9. You have extended forgiveness repeatedly, yet they remain unchanged. There are instances when an individual expresses remorse with a sigh, stating, "I assure you, it will not occur again." You acknowledge with a nod. Is it due to a desire to accept their claims as true? Subsequently, the following week arrives, and the cycle resumes. This experience resembles déjà vu, accompanied by a sense of disappointment. You continue to provide opportunities, hoping that this time they will understand. It is possible that a change will occur. However, they do not. Each occurrence gradually diminishes your resilience. Older adults often exhibit a remarkable capacity for forgiveness. Experience demonstrates that mistakes are universal. Life is inherently complex, and harboring resentment is burdensome. Therefore, we extend forgiveness repeatedly. This lack of understanding is not due to forgetfulness but rather to optimism. You anticipate that they will acquire knowledge. You address their concern. However, individuals may occasionally misinterpret your kindness as an invitation for unreserved behavior. They do not view your forgiveness as a gift. They view it as a promise. Nancy, 75, is a retired librarian residing in Pennsylvania. Her daughter, currently in her 40s, exhibits a recurring behavior of soliciting assistance, making commitments, and subsequently withdrawing until the next emergency arises. Nancy has settled overdue bills, provided childcare for her grandchildren on short notice, and accessed her emergency savings multiple times. Every time her daughter acknowledges, "I recognize my mistakes. Mom, I will improve my performance." However, the cycle consistently recurs. The apologies become more refined. The disappointments intensify. Nancy expressed that she began to perceive her actions as enabling rather than assisting. Moreover, I experienced a sense of losing my identity throughout the process. Psychologists refer to this pattern as a forgiveness loop. This phenomenon occurs when an individual depends on your forgiveness to continue engaging in the same behavior without any meaningful alteration. This dynamic gradually erodes trust, resulting in the forgiver experiencing feelings of powerlessness, invisibility, and disrespect. Older adults, who prioritize tranquility over discord, may find it appealing to continue forgiving to circumvent conflict. However, Granting forgiveness does not mean that the pain becomes less intense. Clarity is essential. Your emotions are legitimate. The experience of pain is genuine. Your reactions are valid. And your sensitivity is justified. One is entitled to receive honesty and respect consistently, rather than selectively based on others' convenience. Forgiveness ought to function as a bridge rather than a revolving door. If you find yourself unable to continue forgiving without compromising your peace, it is acceptable to assert your limits. You should approach this with clarity, not anger or a dramatic departure. Establishing boundaries is not an indication of unkindness, rather, it reflects wisdom. Forgiveness should not serve as an allowance for ongoing harm. This approach facilitates release and promotes relaxation. You have dedicated a significant portion of your life to providing opportunities to others. Now is the right time to set aside time for yourself. The present is an opportunity to protect your emotional well-being, vitality, and tranquility. There is no need for guilt regarding this matter. This is not currently the case. If this video resonated with you in any way, please click like to indicate your engagement and presence in this shared experience. Disseminate this video to individuals of significance in your life, as they may be silently bearing similar burdens that remain unrecognized by others. Please consider subscribing to this channel to continue our shared journey. The objective extends beyond discussing pain, it encompasses the acquisition of healing methods, the cultivation of a more effortless existence, and the pursuit of daily joy. I sincerely appreciate your presence.